Final feelings for Georgia and South Carolina. These two teams have played every single year since 1992. This is the last year that's going to be continuous for some time. It looks like the SEC is not going to pair these teams up moving forward. If they were, they probably would have played them in 24 together. We're going to see what happens with Georgia. Georgia's going to play the Gators and Auburn probably forever. We're going to see what happens with Tennessee and South Carolina. But we already know that this game is the last time these two will play a divisional games, the last time they'll play a consecutive game for a while. So Georgia's just got such a huge advantage in this game. I trust our audience. I appreciate our audience. And it's just, you're asking a lot for South Carolina to come into Athens and win this game. They are not just significant underdogs. They are drastic underdogs. And, that's going to be hard. That's going to be hard to deal with. Paul Feinbaum earlier this week, I want to see what Georgia can do against a real opponent. South Carolina will provide that. They might not provide much more. I hate to be that way. Groupthink is not always a great thing, okay? So, when everybody's saying the same thing, it's not always good. South Carolina right now, they did not play horrible against North Carolina. They really didn't. And North Carolina didn't play so hot against them. But everybody's making this stuff about South Carolina getting sacked so often. Some of that was on Spencer Rattler too, though. They have an exceptional player in I'm going to get his name exactly correct. I don't want to get it wrong. But he is the real deal at South Carolina. He teams up with Xavier Legette is as good a player as Georgia will face in the regular season at skill. This guy is legit. I know Mullins. I know that part of South Carolina. This guy is, it's not surprising at all that he's really good. That's a very gifted area of South Carolina when it comes to talent. And you just turn the tape on and turn the TV on. I know Kirby says you can't learn a lot from him. Okay. I learned that he's really, really good. Y'all probably already knew that, but goodness, he makes a lot of plays. He will be a real challenge for Georgia for sure. But other than that, they're just not. One problem for Legette and Spencer Rattler and South Carolina just does not have the big guys. They're not there. Do you remember in 11 and 12 and 13, but say that grouping in there when Jadavion was there in 11, 12, and 13, they had Melvin Ingram. They had some dogs on that team, man. They had some players. They had some guys that would come take your lunch money and punch you in the face. They had players. Steve Spurrier was a really good coach for them, but he was not a great recruiter, and he wound up with some Connor Shaw was great. Jadeveon Clowney was great. Marcus Lattimore was great. Their receiver, and then they had guy that wound up playing for the Carolina Panthers for a while. They had a lot of players. Melvin Ingram. So they have had those guys are gone. They're not there. And Spencer Rattler is a good quarterback, y'all. He is. He's good. But he cannot block people, too. And sometimes I think they try to ask him to do too much. Make sure you're taking advantage of our offer with EcoPoly. Two-tone furniture if you want it. 20-year warranty. You get that no matter what. It's made in Georgia no matter what. Fade-resistant, recycled material, easy to clean. It is awesome. So you can save even more money than the 15% off as well as the free shipping by going direct to the manufacturer, which is in Dodge County, Eastman, Georgia. Prices continue to rise. Purchasing from the manufacturer is becoming more and more popular. Although EcoPoly sells nationwide, get the best prices by going down to Eastman or up to Eastman or over to Eastman or wherever in Dodge and get yourself some of this furniture for your new backyard, your new beach house, your new pool, your new, whatever, your second house, whatever. Congratulations on it. Do it right. Our friends at EcoPoly know how to do it. And Kirby and them, man, they know how to slow really good quarterbacks who are not great down. And that's what I expect to see happen when you look at South Carolina and Georgia as we get into this game. Georgia has now been a 20-plus point favorite over South Carolina a lot lately. And there's going to be this discussion of, hey, they're, what about when South Carolina beat Georgia? And I mean, can we stop that? Like, so Georgia, South Carolina has the number 3. Listen to this. They have the number 3 passing offense in the country. They're throwing it all over the place. Georgia's number 9. And now, South Carolina's got about 70 yards more a game, but it's still, I mean, it's not like you can't, I mean, the passing is a legitimate problem, but they don't protect. They don't protect. UW is at 1. Colorado, who can really throw it, is at 2. South Carolina at 3. Ole Miss, the Rebels at 4. Southern California at 5. I mean, some of these are really good teams. Oregon at 7. I'm not going to include Syracuse as a really good team. Wazoo at 8. Georgia at 9. UAB at 10. LSU at 11. Texas at 13. That Colorado State game, those guys are going to be throwing the ball all over the place on Saturday night. We're going to nestle into that game. We're going to get into our Eco Polys. We're going to use the cushions. We're going to watch these games. It's going to be exciting. ESPN late that night. But South Carolina's just not good on third down defense. 110th in the country. They're not good at red zone offense. They're not good. Red zone defense. They're not great at red zone offense. Total defense, almost 90th in the country, 380 yards, not ideal. Scoring offense, 32. That's going to take a hit this week. Their rush defense their passing, they are almost the worst in the country, 101st. Their rush defense, 71st. It's just not great, y'all. This is not like where you want to be. Now, they're not a disaster at any one thing. The third down defense, they're not getting off the field. You're converting about 50% of the time on them there. And, I mean, the worst thing they're at is running the ball. They don't run the ball, and you're playing Georgia. Man, that is not a good combination. Not a good combination at all. And they really had a fight with Furman. I mean, for a half. They did not play as bad against North Carolina, I don't think, as people are assuming. If you watch the game, they actually had a chance to creep back in that game because of how poorly North Carolina's quarterback played in that fourth quarter. I mean, that game was won. They were up 17 or so, North Carolina. And then, South Carolina had some shots in that game. But I feel like I know these guys pretty well. They're going to have a hard time against Georgia. They're going to have a hard time against Georgia this week. Now, what will it look like for the Dogs? Are you going to be able to run the ball more efficiently with John Edwards? Are you going to see more explosive plays from Carson Beck? I don't know. We're going to see. I mean, what we're seeing from Georgia is they are very efficient with things. I mean, they when you look at Georgia, and you can't just look at stats, but it is a barometer. Their run offense is not where they want it to be, but their passing is really taking off. They're top 15 in scoring 47 points a game. That's a lot. Total defense is 17th, but they're number 2 in scoring defense. So when you're scoring 47 points a game and you're giving up 5, I understand who they played. Well, Oklahoma played someone and won 77-0, and the next week they struggled. Georgia hasn't struggled yet, but they will have a legitimate foe here. They will have a legitimate foe, and you want to see what they look like against a team that has players on it. And South Carolina has players. Make no mistake about that. They've got guys. They just don't have the guys Georgia does. So Shane Beamer's going to have to absolutely outcoach Kirby. They will use trick plays. Okay, they did an onside kick against North Carolina. They love the screen game. There's a lot of stuff that South Carolina knows. They're not idiots. They know that they cannot just line up and beat Georgia. That there's a couple of teams that can do that. Probably Texas, maybe Florida State, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, LSU, people like that have the capability to do that. It's not saying they would. South Carolina's not in that grouping. So you're going to see a lot of side-to-side balls, which might not be ideal with Smile, Munden, and Pop as your linebackers. You're going to see a ton of throwing. This is going to be a very long game in the first half because South Carolina is going to throw it and throw it and throw it and throw it some more. And if they're not completing passes, that's going to make for a long, because the clock is going to stop on those when they're. That's not the case when they're moving the ball in any way. If you receive the ball and the first down is marked, the clock's running during that, like in the past. But when it's an incomplete pass, the clock stops. So we could see a longer game. We've already seen a really long game, UT Martin with Georgia, but I just, y'all, it's gonna be hard for South Carolina to stick in this thing the whole time. They did not play well in the first half last week against Furman. They played okay in the first half against North Carolina. They don't have a running game to speak to. But what Georgia needs to worry about, I think more than anything, is being prepared for the moment. We don't know when that moment will be. It could be this weekend that South Carolina just comes out, really plays well, is physical and all that. And, they have a much better quarterback than they had 19, than they've had lately. So they got a quarterback. They have a very good player maker with Xavier Legette. I just don't. But it's everything else. I mean, you're not going to win a football game with two guys. So, this will be Georgia's sort of first test-ish or quiz. The Auburn game will be a different conversation, and then Kentucky after that will be a different conversation because Kentucky-Georgia will be overwhelmingly physical. But this week, South Carolina is going to need turnovers. They're going to need to steal possessions. You have to watch out for onside kicks. North Carolina was not prepared for that. You're going to need to watch out for trick plays. South Carolina does not mind throwing balls that they intend on the receiver moving forward backwards. So those can always be thrown as trick plays. That doesn't hurt their feelings. But they're going to get the ball on the perimeter. They know they're going to have a hard time on Georgia's defensive line. It's going to be really tough to pull that off. So they're not trying to play that game. They're trying to win the way that they can win. And that's not going to be the way that everybody else thinks about playing, which is the way Georgia plays, which is straight and normal and forward, no trick plays and no onside kicks and all that stuff. You got, for sure, Shane Beamer is going to try something. So you have to be prepared all the time. Against North Carolina, onside kick. Against Furman, against Furman, their first touchdown, South Carolina fakes a field goal and goes for a 2-point conversion, gets stopped. Now, for me, I just take the point, right? It's a point if that matters. They're not going to take it back. So they had to chase that a little bit during the game, but as it didn't matter at the end of the day. But you have to be ready for, because they're not the better team. I just think it's going to be hard for Carolina to really perform the way they have to win. I don't see it. Thanks for watching.